Daphne's Room is the 17th episode of the second season of Frasier, and this is, I think, one of the most memorable episodes. It gets a little awkward and uncomfortable at one point, but it also has what I consider to be one of the all-time funniest Frasier scenes. So there will be spoilers as I go into some detail about this episode. It's directed by David Lee, and it starts off with Frasier playing Great Balls of Fire on the piano, which is great for two reasons. One, it's very funny. Two, we don't really get to see Frasier playing the piano that often, so it's really nice to have that. And then Martin and Niles come in. It's Maris's birthday. Niles isn't really treating her the way she wants to be treated, even though she gave him mixed signals, and that as a subplot is absolutely fine. I don't mind how that played out, and it tied in quite nicely with something Frasier did, but I'll get to that in a little bit. The main part of the narrative then kicks in as Frasier goes into Daphne's room to retrieve a book of his, and while he shouldn't have gone in without her permission, at the same time, had he just gone in, got the book and left, I'm sure it would have been fine. But Daphne walked in and found him snooping. And I have to say, I love the room. There are so many, well, what I would call junk, but I think to Daphne, little knickknacks absolutely everywhere. I imagine designing that room, gathering all of the bits and pieces would have been such tremendous fun. And the brief time we get to see this room, I absolutely loved it. Frasier, when Daphne walks in, has a bottle of her pills, medication, in his hand, and he stuffs it into his pocket. And of course, Daphne doesn't see this, but she's still really outraged that he's invaded her personal space. He apologizes, they draw a line under it, everything's fine. So we think. Frasier then realizes the next day that he's got her medication, and he sneaks into her room to put it back when he thinks she's going to be busy with Martin, but Martin manages to convince her to not do his physiotherapy that day. And once again, Daphne walks in, and Frasier will not be caught this time. And we have this beautifully choreographed scene where Daphne is walking around her room, and Frasier is doing everything he can to try and hide. And it turns out she's actually getting undressed and getting ready to go in the shower, but Frasier ends up in the bathroom. I don't know what he was thinking, because clearly she was getting ready to go in the shower. So I don't know why he thought going in the bathroom was the smartest decision, but nevertheless, that's where he ends up. And he's hiding behind a door, but we, the viewer, can see this bit with Eddie, where Eddie comes in and he's drinking out of the toilet. There are three great Eddie moments in this episode. That moment, I mean, there are actually more. There are a few other moments where Eddie is just absolutely adorable, but three key moments for me is the moment where he's drinking out of the toilet, the moment a little bit earlier than that, I think, where Frasier is holding onto his tail, holding onto his little bottom. He was very, very cute, and a moment towards the end that I'll discuss when I get there. But Daphne sees Eddie and tells him to get out. And we, the viewer, know, I think it's clear what's going to happen next, because Frasier behind the door can't see that Eddie's come in. And Frasier thinks he's been caught. And he comes out of the room, and Daphne's screaming, Frasier's screaming, he's running out of the room. It's all very chaotic, but not as chaotic as things become. Obviously, Frasier is mortified, and we have this really great scene where he meets Niles for coffee, and Roz is there, and we don't get a lot of Roz in this episode, which is unfortunate, but any Roz is better than no Roz. And Niles mentions that he bought Maris a car, and basically he's bribing her to get back into her good books, and Frasier thinks that he's a coward, but the bribery does come in hand later on, and that's the way Niles' story ties in with Frasier, with Frasier's part of the narrative. And Frasier ends up basically bribing Daphne by saying, if you stay, I'll redecorate your room. In his defense, the gesture made sense. At this point, he wasn't just buying her a car. He was offering to redecorate it so that her personal space was comfortable in the way she wanted it, and that made sense within the context of the problem. And thankfully, she stuck around. I mean, I think we all knew she would, because Frasier without Daphne just wouldn't be the same. And I think the episode, up until that point, seemed like things couldn't get any worse for Frasier. And then, of course, we get to the scene that I think is just amazing. It's awkward and uncomfortable, but it's so funny. Niles basically tells Frasier that yes, he may be scared of Maris and that's why he bribed her, but Frasier is doing the exact same thing, and Frasier refuses to accept that it's the same situation. So Niles seizes the opportunity to run into Daphne's room. Just in the doorway, I mean, that's still bad enough, but he's not going completely into her personal space. And I have to say, credit to Niles, I'd half expected him to walk in the door and basically collapse because he was in the personal space of his own goddess. And he didn't. He was giddy like a schoolboy because he was winding up Frasier. And he jumps in and out of the room, and unfortunately, they cause a bit of a mess, so they try and fix it up. Niles learns that Daphne isn't going to just take money from Frasier, she's going to quit. He starts to panic. Martin comes in. And to be honest, I don't really know what Martin's doing at that point. He starts to mess with it's an amazingly done scene. He starts to mess with her bedding for some reason, and then Niles is playing with her clothing. I think he seized an opportunity, and it's just, it's absolute chaos. And then Daphne walks in, and we just get a close up of everybody's face in shock and disbelief. And then Eddie with her underwear in his mouth, her bra in his mouth, and that's obviously my other favourite bit with Eddie. And instead of dissolving into an argument or Daphne storming off, we just brilliantly cut to Daphne in a car dealership with Eddie in the passenger seat. And it's very clear there that Frasier has succumbed to buying her a car to make amends. And it's the perfect way to end that episode because things have been quite tense up until that point. Funny, but tense because clearly Daphne was very upset, and we don't like to see Daphne upset. And I think had it dissolved into a fight or a screaming match after that very chaotic scene, it would have been a little bit too heavy. So just cutting to the bribery, I thought was the perfect way. Just Eddie, oh, Eddie's face, absolutely fantastic. Really funny episode. Yes, it's awkward at times, but it's beautifully done, wonderfully choreographed, and as I said, that's. I still want to know what Martin was doing. That scene is just. It's absolutely fantastic and so funny, and as an episode, it's brilliant. Absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm pretty confident that that's always going to be the case. Daphne's Room is a very well written, well executed episode that absolutely puts a smile on my face. I really, really love it, and I'm pretty confident that that's always going to be the case.